Welcome back, everybody. It's your time to EdUp on the EdUp Experience podcast, where we make education your business. You might hear a little bit of an echo if you are listening today. I'm in I've transitioned now to my new opportunity at Lindenwood University Global, and they have me here in Missouri, and I'm staying in a house. There's nothing in this house. It's a beautiful house, but there's nothing in it on the walls to take the sound, to pad the sound. So it might be a little echoey. With that said, I am always excited when I have both a first-time guest co-host and a first-time guest, which is who we have on this episode, and we're going to have a great conversation. I'm gonna remind everybody, though, before I bring in my guest host, to head to edupexperience.com. You guys check out our categories. You can find what you want to listen to, and don't forget to go to commencementthebook.com. You can check out the book that we are writing that's going to take all of these amazing insights from everybody we've interviewed and put them into a smaller, if you want to go listen to 370 episodes, you could do that, or you could read the book, and hopefully you take all these great themes and issues and problems and solutions and put them into something that you can consume rather quickly. And speaking of quickness, I've got a person with me as my guest co-host today. He is quick. He's sharp. He's fast, and he's the senior vice president. All right, senior vice president at Dignity Global Health Education. Here he is, Jeffrey Roach. What's happening? How are you?
Good. I'm doing well, Joe. How are you doing?
Good. Did you know you were going to get an applause today?
I did know I was going to get an applause like that. That's wonderful.
Yeah. Well, it's all for you, my friend. And how are you feeling about your first time guest co-hosting gig here with me today?
I'm excited. Obviously, congratulations to you on your awesome new opportunity.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And it's been a pretty wild couple of days. I drove all the way from California all the way to Missouri. It was a long a set of days, because there's not much to look at once you hit the eastern side of Colorado to Missouri. It's kind of a blank canvas, if you will. But thank you very much. And, I'm excited to have you here. Why don't you just real briefly, tell us, for everybody that's listening, what is Dignity Health Global Education?
Sure. Yeah. So Dignity Health Global Education, by the name, obviously folks, as know Dignity Health extremely well on the West Coast. Yep. And actually Dignity Health as a healthcare system is a co-founder of Dignity Health Global Education. And we essentially are, really at the cusp of being an intermediary between higher education and healthcare. And so we really are passionate and specialized around working with healthcare organizations and systems to bring together the right academic partners to deliver solutions that meet the needs of healthcare today and tomorrow. And so, we have entities like, Pepperdine, entities like Duke, University of Arizona, among others, that we partner with to develop healthcare certificates primarily, but we also have some degree partners as well to deliver programs that meet the needs of healthcare leaders, but also just healthcare professionals.
Well, what a time to be in healthcare, right? It's crazy. Healthcare professionals it just at a premium, and everybody's getting sick with Omicron right now. And we're gonna bring our guest. He's probably got a lot to say about healthcare education in the state of California, and what students are after in terms of programs these days. I want to tell you guys that this gentleman we're about to interview is
amazing.
And here he is, ladies and gentlemen. His name is Ken Kuhlken. He's president at Perelandra College.
Amazing.
What's up, Ken?
Yeah, I don't know about that intro. I kind of like the applause better, but
well, here you go. Ken Kuhlken, Perelandra College. We can do it again. We can keep trying as many sound effects as you want, Ken, until we find one you like.
That would be plenty. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was just kidding. Welcome to the show.
Well, thank you. Welcome. I'm very happy to be on.
Why don't you set the stage for us, Ken? Tell us about Perelandra College. Where is the college located? What kind of programs you guys have? How long it's been there? Just, do your thing.
Well, we are really have nothing to do with healthcare education, I'm sorry to say, because it's a great field. And also those universities you mentioned, I used to teach at the University of Arizona, and my wife is a now teaching at Pepperdine. So I respect them very much. What we are, though, is a very small college. We're specialized in, we used to specialize in writing. We were founded 20 years ago, this coming June, actually. Pam and I had spent a few years teaching in a Christian college, and we had become sorely discouraged by the quality of contemporary Christian arts, creative writing in particular. That was our field. So with enthusiastic encouragement of some students and other people, we who were looking for graduate programs, we decided to found one, to create a school. So we began with the support of a small church and one most generous donor. But after the 5 years it took us to get state approval and national accreditation, the pastor of our church moved away, the church disbanded, and that most generous donor of ours died without, leaving us any great amount of money. So when we earned accreditation, the status didn't guarantee us access to federal grants or loans, but so we kind of struggled along, keeping our tuition quite low, because that was one of the things we wanted to do. We didn't want to saddle artists with student loans. And then some months before our renewal, our 5-year renewal, I was informed that accreditation and approval to access federal student aid were going to become sort of integrated, which meant the Department of Education would get more strict on accreditors, especially about financial issues, which in turn made accreditors more concerned about the financial status of the colleges they accredited. And though we had grown, we weren't able to meet their new definition of financial security. So we let go of accreditation, and that's pretty much where we are now. We're still trying to find our way back to a place that is financially feasible.
Well, first of all, I love that you just told me you have nothing to do with healthcare when I said that you did, then you just gave it to me right from the beginning, which is awesome. But I, the reason I bring up healthcare and the reason I want to connect connect the dots here is because, education is, first of all, it's, in my opinion, very valuable, but we are higher education professionals in general, teaching people how to be better people. And that has never been more important than it is now, as we have people from all industries, getting sick and helping others survive and so on. Tell us what you teach and how it helps people and students become better people.
Well, thank you for that question. As I said, we were quite discouraged. I could give you a whole background about what has happened with Christian arts. It's like since the 1950s, they've been sort of taken over by certain players in the evangelical churches, particularly. Well, I don't want to name anybody, but they at a point they took over the sort of the publishing side of Christian books, what they call it. And for a long time, there were these Christian bookstores, and the churches were pushing these certain books, and they all became very predictable and very, I guess, tame, because they were looking more for inspiration and for people to, believe more strongly the same things that they were teaching at the churches. And, we are, above all else, we're educators, and we want people to live in ways that can make them wiser, and to examine their lives more closely, and to look more closely at the truth, and not necessarily at what somebody else is telling them. We want, critical thinking is very important to us. And for instance, when we taught at this Christian college, they would give these little talks about critical thinking, about teaching critical thinking within our classes. But then at the same time, they would tell us the dogma that they wanted to be held to. Now, I never have understood how you could have critical thinking be predicated on a certain dogma. So we wanted to try to open things up and make people think for themselves, which I believe is healthier and makes people's lives not only more worth living for themselves, but also for the whole community.
Yeah, thank you for that. And Jeffrey, I want to bring you in now because you're, one of the I don't know, arguments, and I'm going to have Ken respond, and first tell me what you think. But one of the arguments around higher ed is connection to jobs, and certain programs out there, liberal arts based programs, programs that teach, skills that are less direct to job, are really a question in question of value. What do you think about that? And then Ken, tell me after Jeffrey gives his 411 on it, tell me what you think.
Right.
Yes. So Joe, thank you for that. And let me just say that I am a student of the liberal arts, and so maybe that makes me biased, but I've also had the privilege, of working in higher education. First at a liberal arts college, and then also at a STEM university. And, I'll just say this, I think without question, liberal arts education, in my opinion, based on what I've seen, also in hiring people throughout my career, it really does provide you what I would consider a mind, body, spirit approach to education. And so I don't care what industry says in terms of skills, but when you really get down to it, you will truly see that individuals that come out of a liberal arts background with critical thinking, with the evaluation skills to really understand, is this fact or fiction, and also that hunger and desire to always want to learn more. From my vantage point, a liberal arts degree and a liberal arts program, when done right, are superb and supreme.
What do you think about that, Ken?
Yeah, well, obviously, I agree with that completely. But as I mentioned, my daughter goes to MIT, and I'm quite a fan of, I encouraged her to do that because that's where her, her calling seems to lie. She's just always been good at math and sciences and things, and completely the opposite of her mother and father. But at the same time, I am a little bit wary. I try to encourage her to take other classes while she's at that college, and and they're good. I mean, I don't mean to cast any aspersions on that college. They've been wonderful to us and wonderful to her, and they do require a lot of courses in the liberal arts. So I don't mean to object to anybody, stressing STEM, but I do think that technological advances in our culture have become like what the culture is largely all about, and that's very dangerous because any field of science that has any possibility of doing damage, as well as as doing positive things, you need people to back off a little bit and say, well, wait a minute, this is maybe not the only thing we should live for is to make better widgets and make more money. So I think people should be, my older daughter, I think one of the greatest things that she's ever done, and she's done a lot of great things, but she started a school with the district. She's an administrator at Arizona in a school district, and she started a school in which the students were required to get a credential in a vocational field, as well as a credential as well as the preparation for admission to the University of Arizona. And to me, that was like what everybody ought to do. Everybody ought to be taught STEM subjects and liberal arts subjects and social science subjects, and just all the way around. They ought to be taught how to balance books and how to deal with employers and there are a lot of things in the world that are not covered in every academic program. So I'm just, when we are part of what we have always been about is simply introducing people to ideas that they may not otherwise get, or to introduce them to them in other ways. We've kind of segued into where we're about Christian wisdom. And the only thing that the Christian thing about us is that we do believe in Christ and his message, but we don't want to force anybody to follow that. We don't want to be dogmatic or require anything. We just want people to be awakened to a lot of the wisdom that's come out of Christianity. And if the school were to grow, we would probably, I'm sure we would want to bring in other wisdom curricula, for wisdom of the East and wisdom of Aboriginal peoples, and all kinds of things that might awaken us to the whole spectrum of living is about.
Well, Ken, this is if you've been listening, as you said, to the EdUp experience, you know that we like to ask a curveball question or two around here. Are you ready?
Yep.
That's my transition music. And Jeffrey, since he's a first-time guest co-host, he has to answer a question too. So Ken, the question to you, well, let me say, Jeffrey, the question to you is going to be first. You go after Ken, but the question, so you could start thinking about it, is what is the dream vacation that you haven't taken during COVID that you need to take when you actually can travel somewhere? And Ken, of course, we're going to ask you, what's your entrance music? What's that song that plays in your living room when you walk in, or at graduation, at commencement? What's the song that introduces you?
That would be Jimi Hendrix playing the Star Spangled Banner.
How do you like that? Why do you choose that?
Because I have a series of novels coming out in January it's called For America, and it's a baseball main character is a baseball player.
I love it. I love that you chose Jimi Hendrix. That's ridiculously awesome. Of course, the guitar skills are almost unrivaled. He was amazing.
Yeah, you can find it on YouTube, by the way, and it's just quite an experience just to listen to it now.
Well, that gives you, Jeffrey, let's hear about this dream vacation.
Yeah, so my family and I love to do cruises, which obviously have not happened during the pandemic. But in terms of a dream vacation, I'd probably say I've always talked about wanting to go to Dubai. And so, there's definitely an aspect of that I would love to do. I also had friends who just recently went to Jordan and their pictures looked amazing. So, something like that, something definitely outdoors, and something that would be pretty exotic.
Jeff, jump in. Any questions you have?
Yeah. Ken, I was curious, I was looking through, books that were recommended, and obviously your point there spoke out to me so clearly, because when I looked through all the books that were recommended, many of them were actually books we had to read at Moravian as undergrad students. And so, I'm curious from your perspective, when you look at faith-based higher education today in the United States, what other institutions would you consider to be your peer academic institutions?
Well, I really wish I could answer that, but I don't know of any of them that are even in the least bit like us. And a lot of that has to do with the size of the colleges and their accreditation and such. We've been wrestling with this accreditation business for longer than I care to think. And right now there is no, there was an accreditor called American Council for the Accreditation of Independent Colleges, and they pretty much got blackballed recently because they were giving away accreditation to institutions that didn't deserve it, apparently. But they were the only ones that I could think that we really fit with, because if you look at the Christian accreditors, they all require that you have this certain dogmatic background and a certain, you have to sign documents saying that you find their mission statement to be accurate and that you'll follow it. And I don't want to do that. I don't want to have to try to get our students to become obligated or even bend toward any particular dogma with although obviously we're trying to teach a lot of Christian faith, we don't want to make anybody become a Presbyterian or a Calvinist or a whatever they're sort of being taught at these other colleges.
Well, Ken, it's interesting because as you were talking earlier when we first started, to Joe's point, I immediately reflected on my earlier part of my career when I was a hospital administrator for 9 years. And, obviously at a hospital, we had pastoral care and we had social work. And, I worked actually incredibly close with our chaplain in a number of areas, particularly when we had a lot of tragedies, not just patients, but also in the community, because we felt that we were an anchor of the community and it was our responsibility to be there in support and in love for one another. But one of the situations that rang a bell for me was we had Reiki and we had a complementary and medical arts therapist program, which probably, in some ways even relates a little bit to some of what you talked about your teaching. And for us, this was a program that our patients loved. It was a program that for some patients, it was actually the only source of I don't want to say healing, because obviously, for some people only Jesus can heal truly, but in this situation, there was definitely aspects of people feeling better and giving them a source of comfort and care. And I will never forget the day on the front page of our newspaper, a pastor happened to be of a certain church attacked us. And I can remember our CEO calling me up, who was a very religious person herself. And she said to me, "How dare him?" And I said, "Well, thanks. He probably went to, a different university, of which I won't say. And he has a very different view of this." I said, "But you know what? In a Christian way, let's have a discussion with him." And she said, "Are you kidding?" I said, "Oh yeah." I said, "Let's have a discussion with him." And I scheduled it along with our chaplain. And we discussed how, we were doing this for our patients. We weren't in any way pushing some, say, satanic, as we were accused, element, but it was really, really interesting how, a church pastor was attacking a hospital on the front page without first coming to us and discussing it.
Yeah, I wish I could tell you how easily I can identify with that, because, well, I don't even want to get into it because it brings in a certain college. But there are many times that we have encountered, I've been in higher education for about 50 years, and it's and I run into a lot of situations where where people are supposed to do a certain thing. They're supposed to act in a Christian way. They're supposed to act like civil human beings when they're academics, and found very, very often that they don't act the way they're supposed to. And so I certainly appreciate that. And I also appreciate that other person jumping in and saying, how dare they do this? But, it is something, it is very Christian to say that, I will say this, that the situation I was, not really at liberty to talk about was about somebody teaching something in a class that was at a Christian university that was really very non-threatening to any kind of faith. And it was more of an issue of what you might call political correctness at this point, because it had to do with, with some what is and what isn't proper in a classroom. And the student went and complained directly to the dean, and the dean then consulted with somebody else, and then they brought in the instructor, the professor, and just absolutely tore her apart and relieved her of her duty just like that, without even consulting with anybody. When this is a biblical college supposedly, and they have and it's very clear in the Bible, in one of Paul's epistles, that when a dispute comes up, you're supposed to take it to the person you have a dispute with, and then there's a whole whole series of steps you're supposed to go through before you would take it to any authority. And you see that not happening. That's one of the things that we we would love to see have more students to be able to clarify to them, is that there are so many things that are considered Christian, behavior that are absolutely not and in any way justifiable by what you would read in scriptures.
Ken, do you think, let me jump in and ask you, do you think that a school with a religious affiliation can survive in today's higher education environment? Because it's really competitive out there. And, one of the areas where people have predicted that some colleges may face, the odds are against them, so to speak, are schools that, excuse me, that have a religious affiliation, because it's not as desired as it used to be. People aren't, as interested. Some are, some aren't, but there don't seem to be as many that are looking for the religiously based education. And for those that are, there are some really big players out there, online schools that are doing, really, scaling that Christian based learning, but doing it at scale. How do you feel, what do you see as the future of religious based education? And, can you survive these, really difficult times for higher ed?
Well, if I had anything to do that would change the the landscape, it would be to try to make it easier for those schools to survive. And one of the probably the big, I see, in the first place, I'm not really interested in what's going on in large institutions, not because it doesn't matter, but because that's just not the arena I'm trying to work in. And I'm very much a fan of small colleges. And I would love to see there be more startups of small colleges. And I think for a college to survive, there's a like, if you go with the accreditors, when we had a problem with our accreditor, it was because the game had changed when this federal financial aid became entrenched with the accreditation system, and so the accreditors were forced to make the colleges put up bonds of, I don't know, minimum of $100,000, and it's a lot of money. I mean, it's really a lot of money for a small college can almost not survive just without doing voluntarily teaching without
Yeah, and that happens, just to clarify for everybody, that happens when, as a result of many of the college closures, the for-profit schools in the 2010s, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, the federal government, for financial aid, is requested that some schools put up a letter of credit to really shield against closing. If a school closes, the federal government wants to have money in reserve that they can, basically alleviate the debt of the current students. So that's why that happened, just for the audience, if anybody was wondering what you were talking about there, Ken.
Right. Yeah, I understand that. But the thing to me is that the tie-in of federal financial aid with the with the accreditation process is unfortunate. I mean, when I started college, it wasn't like that. It was there was no financial aid. I think it came in the second or third year I was an undergraduate, and ever since then, the states and other financing entities have fallen out of the business, and it has gone over to the federal government. So, which essentially comes back to the students, and then the students. I have my daughter that I mentioned that is administrator. I paid for her college all the way through undergraduate, and then she took out some loans to get her master's degree and her credential. And she's, it's been at least 20 years, and she's still paying off her student loans. And she's in Arizona, so she doesn't make as much money as administrators elsewhere. So, it's just very, very unfortunate, the whole student loan thing. And what it has done, I believe, is to make that and accreditation become entwined is just not correct. I mean, if there were accreditors, for instance, that would just, credit somebody, because accreditation was originally supposed to be about quality of education and not about the school's finances, which is largely what it's about now. I just read an article the other day. I'm sorry, I don't mean to go on and on, but I read an article that about Norfolk College, I believe it was, or Norwalk College in, I believe, Connecticut, and they had we're looking at being accredited by the, I guess, in New England regional creditors, and it mentioned that it would be 4 years or 5 years for them to even get accredited. Well, in the meantime, they're supposed to be surviving, and they have some connections at Broadway and stuff that apparently are, because it was a school of performing arts. I'm sorry.
Ken.
But if they don't have that, what are they going to do? So you have a small college of liberal arts or a small college of, that's like us, and what, we can't afford to pay the cost that somebody of a larger college would pay, and we can't afford to wait those 5 years and without having students.
Ken, it's interesting to Joe's question, because having attended a university that certainly had a faith-based connection, it wasn't outrightly in the same way that so many other, or I shouldn't say so many, that some push it, but obviously Moravian is a faith and is a community. I would certainly describe it as a very loving Christian community. But one of the things I think that's interesting is that for faith-based institutions, or those that have any element of alignment, that I've started to see many and many of them do, is to look at how you integrate the faith aspects, whether that's mission, whether that's service, whether that's, love for thy neighbor, through service or whatever, into all the other aspects of degree programs. And so, at Moravian, even for me, I was a political science student because I love politics. And some people are like, oh my gosh, but I do. And so, for us, we looked at the religious aspects of political science. And so, we still had elements like that still brought in really, in my opinion, critical aspects of what was a powerful liberal arts education. And so I've also seen some that are really making sure they think about the human-centered aspects to certain, careers. Healthcare is a good one. It's all about humans, yet in many ways we've forgotten some aspects of how we truly support humanity within healthcare, and we've gotten away from doing some of that. And so it's interesting from that end how important it is that we align faith with so many other aspects, because faith in itself aligns with every other academic degree.
Yeah, I very much agree with that. And we would just like to be able to pursue that without having to be, I guess, pressured to have to pay so much expenses just to play in that ball game. And that's why I disagree with the financial aid aspect of accreditation, because I think it makes the cost go up so strong astronomically that it becomes almost impossible and to deal with, and so consequently, if there are other small institutions that want to do what we have tried to do, or not necessarily even in the Christian realm or any kind of faith-based realm, but just in liberal arts or whatever, that isn't a program that they can graduate people with vocational degrees. That what are they going to do? You can't you can't be an entrepreneur without a lot of money in the education. And I can see why that's true in most fields, but I just don't think it should be in education.
Yeah, it's interesting too, because there's a school called the University of Austin. They're trying to start. It's a proposed liberal arts college where they're going to really double down on the on-ground experience of liberal arts, and they're trying to raise millions and millions of dollars because, excuse me, they have to go through all those processes as well, and it's difficult. Well, Ken, as you know, at the EdUp Experience, we like to end our episodes with the same two questions to every guest. Number one, Ken, what did we miss about Perelandra College that you would like to talk about today? Anything you want to say? And then secondarily to that, what do you see as the future of higher education?
Well, I'll tell you what, what I would like to say is that if I haven't made any sense today, or if anybody is interested in what I think more than that, I have a Substack blog. It's called Rats in the Ivory Tower. So that's fairly easy to remember. And I would encourage people to come onto that, and I would be happy to expand on some of this stuff, because all of it to me is very complex issues, and I'm not very good at explaining it in sound bites. So I know
I think
that
you're doing a pretty good job.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
And what do you see as the future of higher education, Ken?
Well, I think it has deteriorated a lot since when I went to San Diego State University, and I had a very good friend who became a very good friend later when I was there as an advisor. And he was telling me, he was a history professor. He was my favorite history professor. And he was telling me that he and everybody in his department, in the history department, they required about half as much work as they had when I went there. And I think that has become, very, very common. I think that a lot of the education has gotten downgraded because colleges have become much more vocational and also much more dependent on sort of consumer behavior. When I was in college, professors were extraordinarily respected, probably more than they should have been, no doubt more than they should have been. But since then, it's become almost a joke, the profession, because so many of the people are adjuncts and so on. And so I think there are a lot of problems that need to be solved. And I have great hopes for the future of higher education, but I have a lot of qualms also.
Interesting. Well, I really appreciate you coming on the show today, Ken. And of course, first, before we close out the episode completely, I do want to thank my guest co-host today. Here he is. Jeffrey Roche. What's going on, Jeff? Did you enjoy your EdUp Experience co-hosting gig today?
Absolutely. It was a lot of fun.
Well, I appreciate how good you are on the microphone, my friends. That means you're going to be invited back to come and co-host with me again. It has nothing to do with the actual microphone skills, but I like having you around. So we're going to do this together again, hopefully.
Looking forward to it. Anytime with you, Joe.
All right. And then, of course, my guest today. Here he is. Oh, he gets the applause this time. Ken Kuhlken. He's president of Perelandra College. Ken, thanks so much for coming on the EdUp Experience.
You're quite welcome. Thank you for having me again.
Ladies and gentlemen, you just EdUp'd